Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now we are going to cover this topic of comparison between the WFS and WMS. Okay. First of all, try to write down by this thing by yourself. Write down the question. Compare, carry out the comparison of WMS and WFS. Carry out a comparison of WMS and WFS. So you have already learnt about the WMS web map services. We have again today discussed in detail about the WFS. Okay. So try to think what type of differences or what type of similarities do you find between WMS and WFS. Write down the answer by yourself. Let's see the answer of this question. First one. With WMS, the machine that requests some other machine for information gets completely rendered map in return for its request. The requesting client does not get raw data. It gets a ready-made map which it merely displays. In contrast, in WFS, the requesting machine gets the raw data for the geographic feature it has requested. This means that the geographic coordinate data of point, line, and polygon features are returned. It is the prerogative of the requesting machine to use the written information in whatever manner it wants. Okay, so before coming on this discussion, I want to get back again to some of our previous discussion about thin client and thick client architecture. Okay, I hope all of you remember about the thick client and thin client architecture that we have learned in the earlier lectures. So when we talk about the thin client architecture, or when we have done the comparison analysis between the thick and thin client architecture, what we have learned over there. Just okay, read this first one, communication needs. What I'm trying to tell that what we have learned earlier in the thick and thin client architecture, this is what a very similar thing that we are finding between WMS and WFS. Quickly read out at your end about the communication needs, this point of the comparison between the thin and thick client architecture. So what you have got from this discussion, that when we talk about the thin client, in this case, whatever we are getting, it is completely processed. The response that is received by the thin client is completely processed, whereas the thick client gets the unprocessed data. Okay, I will come back to this point, but let's move again to the comparison between the WFS and WMS. What it says, that when we make a request from the WMS, whenever you make a get map request to a WMS, what you are getting in the response, you are getting a completely processed data in the response. So the machine just has to display, just has to render that result, and that's it. The client will visualize all that thing. But in contrast of this one, what we are getting in WFS, we are getting a raw data over here. As you have just seen, I have shown you the example of get feature. This one is the response of get feature. This is how you will get the get feature response over here, that you are getting a raw data at this place. But instead of that, this one, if I open the WMS get map request response, see how the response of a get, yeah, like this. So when you make a get map request, you are getting an output like this one. That is, it is a map that you are getting. You are getting an image map, a completely processed data that you are obtaining when you are making a get map request in WMS. But if you make a get feature request in WFS, what you are getting, instead of some display of map, what you are getting this type of coordinates, a very long document which contains all these coordinates. So this is what it is mentioned over here, that whenever we make a WMS, or with WMS, what we are getting a completely processed information. We are getting a map that is drawn on the screen. Whereas in WFS, we are getting a raw data. It will give us the coordinate. When we say raw data, it means it is going to give the coordinate of point line and polygon. Now it is up to the user, whatever type of comparison he or she wants to perform on that one. They can perform their analysis on that raw data or whatever they want to carry out on that data. That's why I was showing you earlier the thin and thick client architecture comparison, so that you can recall all those things that we have learned earlier. That WMS is usually used to cater the thin client, whereas WFS is used to cater the request of thick client. Are you getting this thing? I hope you are able to correlate between these things. That what is the meaning of thin and thick client architecture? There we have learned about the process data is given to the thin client because there is a very limited capabilities at the client end. Whereas in case of thick client, the client is more powerful and the client can perform several type of analysis processing at its own end. Okay, we have the access of local machine in case of thick client. So when we compare between the WFS and WMS, what is happening? In WMS, we are getting a completely processed data. It is useful for a thin client architecture. In WFS, we are going to get a raw data. Raw data means we are going to get the coordinates of point line polygon. Therefore, it is useful for the thick client architecture. Okay, so WMS, it is easier to use. It is more useful for a layman. Why? because we are getting a pictorial representation of our result. WFS is more towards the people who are like professionals or developers. Why? Because we are not getting anything in the form of pictorial representation. We are getting a raw data over here. So this is very first comparison. Second, WFS is the means to get feature level geospatial data and use this data to render a map. The term feature level geospatial data means as geographic coordinate data such as point, line, and polygon features. Hence, WFS request could potentially involve a large amount of data transmission from client server to a client, although the client is required to do more work in terms of making use of geospatial data. WFS offers the client more flexibility. For instance, a client may save the return features to a usable data file. In contrast, a requesting WMS client gets the rendered map back with no opportunity to use the data in any other way. That is, it may or may not display the rendered map. So it is just like the continuation of the previous discussion. The same things are coming over here again. That when we talk about the WFS, we are going to get a raw data, we are going to get the geographic coordinates of the data. And obviously, when you are getting a coordinate, the size of the data will be very large. Okay, since the starting, we are learning that the XML document are very bulky in nature. Their size is very large. So this is again the same problem is that since WFS is generating raw data, it is transmitting the raw data. Therefore, the data transmission is a big process. It is a very large, there is a very large amount of data that will get transmitted in case of WFS. Okay, therefore, there will be more requirement of the internet. And thereafter, once the client receives that data, it is up to a client to carry out the processing, and that's why it is flexible also. Okay, if you know everything, if you get any power, you will have more responsibility. So here also, although it is giving you a lot of data, a lot of processing need to be done by the client, but it is also offering at the same time more flexibility to the client, that in whichever manner he or she want to use that data, they can use that data set. There is no restriction on that one. Why? Because they are providing the raw data. Whatever type of analysis, whatever type of processing you want to carry out, you can carry out on that data because it is a raw data. Now, opposite to this one, what a WMS client is receiving? A WMS client is receiving a processed map. Okay, that's why the size of the transmission will be less, the data transmission will be less. Why? Because the client is getting completely processed data. So the transmission, the data size that will get transmitted will be less. It is easier to use, but it offers not at all any flexibility to the client. Other than making get feature info request, the client cannot do any other thing on the WMS. Okay, so this is what, that although it is giving you the means of providing the facility of completely processed data, but it is at the same time it is offering not at all any flexibility at the client end. The client can visualize that data, they can make get feature info request, and that's it. So this is the second part. Third thing, as WMS does not have the raw data associated with the map, it cannot store the data. Though WFS provide more freedom to a client to make use of geospatial data, the work of the client is increased as it must now make appropriate use of that data, without which the data is just data and not useful information. Therefore, both WMS and WFS are beneficial in their own way, depending on the need of the client. Again, it is a continuation of the previous point, that since we are getting a raw data in WFS, the proper processing need to be done. It offers more flexibility. In WMS, no raw data is given, completely processed data is given. Therefore, client cannot store that data. They cannot do anything on that one. So this is how we can compare a WFS and WMS, but still if you find the use, you will find WMS quite rampantly used nowadays. WFS is also used, WCS is also used, but the problem is what we have discussed in the comparison, that it is providing the coordinate, and that coordinate is not easy to understand. Any layman, even if you open that document, you need some time to understand what is given over there, isn't it? But if you open a WMS, anybody open the WMS, they can see the output, they can understand that output. So it depends who are possible target, means who are um, the audience or user of that application. On the basis of that, we have to decide. But in general, what is used or what we see on the internet in general, it is WMS that we used to see. Okay. So there is WFS also, but it is more towards the people who are developers or who are associated with the GIS. For the general public, it is WMS that is usually used. So any question regarding this part? Comparison? Okay, then. So I hope both WMS and WFS is clear to everyone. Now we are moving to the next one. What is next? It is WCS. And we are not going to cover that WCS in this much detail because it is very much similar to the WFS. So we are not going into that much detail. First, I am sharing one document, OGC document with you. Just wait. So I'm sharing this document of WCS. Okay. And you need to jump to this place. This one. At page number 14. Okay. At page number 14, write it down. Page number 14. And then page number 18. Page number 14 and page number 18. Okay, I'm giving you 10 minutes time. Quickly read this page, these two pages. Page number 14 and page number 18, so that you get some idea about the WCS. 10 minutes time and read about these things. Then we will start WCS. So I think so all of you have read this document. Okay, so what is WCS? Yes, what you have learned about the WCS, Arun?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, WCS interface supports electronic retrieval of
रीड
geospatial
नहीं
data as
करिए, रीड
coverage.
नहीं करिए। क्या समझ में आया, होता क्या है WCS?
मैम मुझे तो ये समझ में आया कि मैम जो जियोस्पेशियल इंफॉर्मेशन मैम उसी को डिजिटली रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं मैम, स्पेस वेरिंग फिनोमेना में काफी।
स्पेस वेरिंग
यस मैम।
फिनोमेना मतलब?
मैम यही तो लिखा है मैम, स्पेस वेरिंग फिनोमेना तो मैम।
अच्छा, चलिए भगत।
Yeah, it gives more extra detail, potential data about the map, and so we can apply like interpolation, extrapolation on the data. Sorry, interpreted, use the data to interpret it, and we WCS for this,
Okay.
and 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 there are three mandatory operations: get capabilities, describe coverage, and get coverage.
Okay. Next, Bhagat, Praveen.
यस मैम।
बताइए।
मैम WCS होता है, सपोर्ट करता है इलेक्ट्रॉनिक रिट्रीवल ऑफ स्पेशियल डेटा, और मैम ये स्पेस मतलब वेरिंग फिनोमेना होता है। और मैम क्या नाम, इसके तीन ऑपरेशन होते हैं: गेट कैपेबिलिटी एंड डिस्क्राइब कवरिंग एंड गेट कवरेज।
ये गेट फीचर से मतलब WFS से ये अलग कैसे है WCS?
मैम ये क्या नाम, WCS क्या नाम है, स्पेस वेरिंग फिनोमेना होता है।
स्पेस वेरिंग का क्या मतलब होता है? नेक्स्ट, रुचि, सेम क्वेश्चन। WCS एंड WFS, डिफरेंस क्या है WCS का WFS से?
WFS में मैम डिस्क्रीट फीचर्स जो होते हैं उनके बारे में इंफॉर्मेशन होती है, और WCS में मैम कवरेज लेते हैं जो भी फीचर्स हैं मैम। एक स्पेस में जो भी कवरेज होता है मैम, एरिया मैम से पॉलीगन या फिर कोई एरिया मैम कवर करते हैं।
ओके, शिवम, सेम क्वेश्चन। आपका ऑडियो नहीं आ रहा है शिवम ठीक से। चलिए नेक्स्ट, सुमित।
मैम दिस WFS एंड WCS के बीच का डिफरेंस पूछ रही हैं?
यस।
मैम WFS में हम किसी पर्टिकुलर फीचर्स के बारे में डिटेलिंग हमें मिलती है, इसकी कोई पर्टिकुलर फीचर है उसके बारे में क्या उसके एट्रीब्यूट्स है वो मिलता है, और एज कम्पेयर देन और WCS में मैम हम किसी पर्टिकुलर स्पेस में टाइम के साथ क्या उसमें चेंजेस आ रहे हैं उससे रिलेटेड जो स्पेस वेरिंग फिनोमेना है मैम, उसके प्रॉपर्टीज के बारे में हमें पता चलता है।
ये आपने कहाँ देखा कि टाइम के साथ वेरिएशन क्या आ रहा है? ये
मैम
किससे आप इंटरप्रेट कर रहे हो?
मैम रिलेट टेम्पोरल लिखा हुआ है मैम, तो टेम्पोरल तो मैम टाइम के साथ ही जो चेंजेस होते हैं उसी को कहते हैं।
ओके, चलिए ठीक। सुनील, आप बताइए। जयश्री।
Ma'am,
Yeah. What is the difference between WFS and WCS?
Ma'am, I didn't read completely, ma'am. I joined through mobile again. I lost my network through laptop.
Okay, so there is a question. Okay, coming back to this one, WFS, WMS we have already covered, and we will cover WCS in the next term in short. But broadly, when we talk about the WCS, everywhere you are seeing it is about the coverage data. Okay, when we say coverage here, it means as a raster data. Okay, when you are reading about the WFS, it was the vector data. It was the feature data, vector data that we were discussing earlier. But when we talk about the WCS, it is basically about the coverages. So let's see, there is a term coverages. Okay, a lot of detail is given over here. But when we talk about the coverage data, as you can see it over here, coverage encoding, GeoTIFF, NetCDF, HDF, NITF. So in general, we have a raster data through which uh, in WCS, we used to represent those coverages, and it is not like a discrete data. In WFS, we were discussing about the discrete data, but in case of WS, we are going to learn about the continuous data. As far as the request goes, it is just same as the WFS. Get capabilities. Second one was describe feature type. Here, instead of describe feature type, it is describe coverage. Okay. Third one was get map. Here, instead of get map, it is get coverage. So basically, WCS is very much similar to the WFS details, but the difference is the type of data which is handled over here. In case of WFS, it is discrete vector data that was handled. In WCS, it is the coverage data that we are going to handle over here. So usually the raster data get handled in the WCS. Okay. So time is already completed. We will discuss this WCS further in our upcoming term, which will be on next Thursday. Okay. So thank you so much. The class is over for now.
Thank you,
Ma'am,
ma'am.
Is there any question?
ma'am, it is possible so we can consider this as last class and give us that additional as tasks.
That I'm not getting. Please ask the question again.
Ma'am, is
Ma'am,
it
he's trying
possible
to say
to?
that day after tomorrow that whatever class will be there, that should in place of that you give us any task and don't take class on that day.
Why?
मैम मन नहीं कह रहा कुछ लास्ट
तो बस तो बहुत 10 दिन का ब्रेक है, आराम से होली मनाइएगा। और वैसे भी नेक्स्ट टर्न पर थोड़ा सा पढ़ाई भी करेंगे और थोड़ा सा केएमएल भी करेंगे, तो आप लोग थोड़ा और एंजॉय करोगे।
तो मैम केएमएल क्लास ले लीजिए।
केएमएल भी करेंगे, थोड़ा सा पढ़ाई भी कर लेंगे, है ना। जीरो पढ़ाई नहीं, हाफ एन आवर 45 मिनट्स की पढ़ाई और फिर उसको केएमएल का टास्क हम लोग करेंगे। ठीक है,
ओके मैम।
ओके
मैम WFS का PDF मैम शेयर कर दीजिए।
ठीक है, ठीक है, ओके। और कोई सजेशन?